once you start to hopefully see those marks improving, the next logical step is, how can I do even better? Now, what's coming up for you now is a conversation between myself and Steve Savage, where we considered how to move from good to excellent in your writing. If you're new or relatively new to ICGS, don't be alarmed by any of this advice. It's something to consider a little further down the line of your studies. But if you're at level 5 and most especially level 6 students, do watch and hopefully take away some useful. Hello, and we're joined now by Professor Steve Savage on the sofa from ICJS, and we're going to be talking a little bit about increasing your marks as much as you can and moving a little bit more from good or very good up to excellent or even very excellent. So we're going to be talking through some tips and ideas on how you can improve those essays at the higher level if possible. So welcome, Steve, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start off by thinking about the types of students that you're targeting here. You do some sessions for us already on moving from very good to excellent in assignments. Who is the target group for that advice, and why do you think it's important?
Well, firstly, I should say that the observations I'll make apply to all students. It's about writing good quality work, and so that applies to all students. But I'm particularly targeting students who hit consistently good marks, very good marks, let's say 66, 67, 68, who are concerned that they can't make that step into the 70s into first class honours work. So it's those people that are on the cusp, and they often come to me and say, I just can't break through. So there's a focus there. Also, students that maybe just creep into the 70s, but don't get much higher than that. So it's about even moving from the excellent to the very excellent. So they're the people I'm focusing on. And the observations relate to my own years of experience as a marker, well, too many years of experience as a marker. But also my experiences as an external examiner, because all degrees, as you know, have external examiners, and so I've been around the country looking at student work and markers' comments on students' work, so it's drawing on that experience. So it's an insight into the mind, the murky mind of the marker in many respects.
Yes, brilliant. And we should probably say that getting marks of that level, sort of 70 and above, is quite rare. I mean, these are really, really good pieces of work, aren't they? And if students, particularly at level 4, are hitting marks in the sort of early to mid 50s, as we would expect at level 4, this is not to alarm them at all. We would expect marks to be much lower when students first start and eventually start to creep up.
Absolutely. So this is about just moving from one stage to the other. So it does apply equally to other levels of student performance.
Brilliant. Okay. So is the advice that you're going to be sharing with us today, is this about writing the assignment? Is it about writing it up?
It is to a great extent, but I'd like to talk about the series of stages or sequences that are involved in producing a piece of work, and in this case a piece of high quality work.
Okay.
So it takes us from selecting the topic, because that is more important than people often think. It takes us through researching the topic and doing the background work and how critical that is, and some do's and don'ts there. Then on to the planning process, how you plan your work before you write up, and then finally on to that writing the piece of coursework or the dissertation. So I should say that what I say does apply to dissertations as well, in slightly different ways, and I'll comment on that.
Oh, okay, that's good. That gives us something to get our teeth into. So why don't we start with that first one you mentioned then, selecting your topic. What's the advice there?
Well, it's about doing homework, and a really good piece of coursework often reflects the fact that the student is very interested in it, even fired up by that topic. So choosing a topic that you are committed to, find very interesting, can actually help you produce a quality piece of work. Now, there is a warning there that sometimes if you feel too passionate about that piece of work, then you may not provide the sort of balance that one would expect of a good quality piece of work. And by balance, I don't mean you sit on the fence, it just means that you give equal hearing to the opposition. So let's say if you feel very strongly about capital punishment, and there's an essay title there about discuss capital punishment, by all means be as passionate as you wish about it, but make sure that you don't give insufficient balance to alternative points of view. Where you're not sure about a choice of a topic, let's say from an essay list, it's not a bad idea to actually read maybe one article on one or two or three topics to find which one you feel most comfortable with. But of course you also have the distance learning materials which give good guidance as well.
So it's about reading the questions carefully, breaking them down a little bit, doing a little bit of background work to find out a bit about what the area is about, and then deciding which question you want to focus on. And what I often say to students is pick something that really interests you. You know, don't pick. Sometimes I think people try and pick questions because they think, oh, I can get a good mark from that question, but it's got to be something that interests you, not necessarily fires you up, but something that, you know, you've got a general level of interest in.
Something that you can talk at length about and with some passion if possible. Not in every case, obviously. So the other thing to take into account is whether there is an available literature. Now, if we provide a list of essay titles, we wouldn't do that if there wasn't a substantial literature to fall back on. With the dissertation, however, it's rather different because you select the topic, you design the topic, so you want to make sure that your choice of dissertation, which carries such a weight on the degree, is one in which there is a sufficient literature to fall back on. So
and not just organisational literature, but also some academic literature as well.
Academic literature,
absolutely.
Because that is about the depth of understanding. But you will get advice on that selection from tutors.
Yeah. So the second one was then going on to researching your topic.
Yeah, because an excellent piece of work is one which shows thorough, extensive research and reading. And you have to put the hours in to get first-class marks, I'm afraid. So it's about how you go about that. What I'd suggest is that before you start, you take the title that you're working on, you break it down into its constituent parts, and think what's involved here, read around each of them, so that you know that you're answering all of the questions. So I always think about the oath you take when you're on the witness box. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's like I promise to answer the whole question and nothing but the question. And so that stage in the proceedings is a really important one. Break the question down, then you start reading around each of them. I'd also say a little hint is that if possible, try and find the most recent reference you can on that area. One that the marker may not have seen themselves, and there's nothing more impressive than that when you're reading something. And it is about raising eyebrows, and you know, Charman 2018, you know, it comes to mind. But the other thing about the most recent text is they will have the most recent up-to-date list of references, so snowball referencing, pick those up, so that sort of research. But there's nothing that influences a marker more than somebody that's gone out there and found their own stuff.
Absolutely, good, brilliant, thank you very much. And then the third is planning your coursework.
Yes, and again a crucial phase in the process, and this is about structure and content, and I always recommend, as many colleagues do, that you have a two-stage approach to planning. Like we do when we do a lecture, we start off with an outline and then we flesh it out. So we start off with a skeleton plan with 4 or 5 headings: introduction, different topics, followed by conclusion. Then you make sure that answers the question and the whole question, and then you move to a more elaborate plan where you start to fill in sub elements of those sections, and then start to put your references in and your sources and your quotations. So that's a really important part of the process. It's about guaranteeing structure and going back to it, and I keep saying it, answering the question and the whole question.
And that structure as well needs to be logical and chronological, if that's suitable. Brilliant. Okay, and then the last stage is writing it up.
Yes, that's that small thing. And again, think about it in terms of the constituent elements that you've set out in your plan, but your introduction is so powerful, and if you grab the reader, the marker in this case, with the introduction, it has a very powerful effect on the rest of the marking process. So, you know, it's maybe refer to a very recent event that, again, you're showing initiative, you're showing interest, that isn't always possible depending on the topic. Then talk about the question. In the introduction, talk about the question, and then say how you're going to deal with it. And we call this signposting. So good signposting, the marker then think, this person knows what they're doing. And hopefully you can maintain that level throughout. So that's the introduction, very important. The main body of the text, of course, is critical, and that is, again, that's about structure and flow. Make sure that it is following the sequence of the question as set, and also that there's a relationship between the different parts. So I've done this and now I'm doing that. Tell the reader where you're going, and so structure and flow. High quality marks, excellent marks, nearly always involve a heavy peppering of sources and references. You are expected to show extensive reading, and that's why the term peppery is great. I think it just captures it. If you've got one reference, see if you can put 2 in. If you've got 2, see if you can put 3 in. Obviously you've got your word limit, but just litter your work with references.
And students will often say, won't they, well, how many sources do I need to write an essay? And I always try and say, it's not, there's not a number here, but I do quite like the expression theoretical saturation, which is when you keep reading and reading and reading, and you start to read the same thing over and over again, and then you realise, I've covered this. I've read so much now that I've covered all of the main points and the main issues, and now I can take it and start constructing my essay. But it's interesting that you said writing up stage are the small part of it, and you said jokingly, but actually those first three stages do take some considerable time, don't they? And
Absolutely.
And time's got to be committed to those.
And one other small point, going back to what I said earlier, nearly done, is that do try and avoid saying cited in. If you're referring to somebody cited in, the marker's thinking, well, why didn't you read the original? Now, sometimes, if it's a 19th century text that's impossible to get out, that's okay. Very sparingly cited in. But again, try and avoid, if you can, cited in a textbook.
Absolutely. Because if it's important enough to be in your essay, it's important enough that you go and try and find it.
And then on to the conclusion.
Yes.
Let's not forget the conclusion.
No, absolutely.
Don't let the essay fizzle out.
Yes.
Go out with a bang, where you go back to the question, explain how you've dealt with it, and then come out with a message.
Absolutely.
And then even go off-piste, as we say, be a bit speculative right at the end about the future if it's policy related. So, leave the marker thinking, wow.
Yes. So create an impression with your introduction, and then have that bit of a wow factor in your conclusion, if possible.
All linked together with a nice structure.
So what are students doing if they miss out? What if they're not getting those top marks? What are they tending not to do?
Well, I've got a list here of things that I've seen from what markers have commented on in terms of, because sometimes it is a marginal thing, if only you'd done this, or if only you hadn't done this. So in terms of what you try and avoid, you must avoid for this level of marks, is slip-ups in presentational style. Typos, missing references. You're not going to get high-class marks, first-class marks with presentation slip-ups. Needs to be a good piece, well written. Failure to answer the whole question. You did really well on this part of it. It's just unfortunately you didn't cover it all. It doesn't mean to say it's got to be 50-50, whatever, but you've just got to answer the whole question. Over-reliance on one or two authors at times. Sometimes that happens periodically, that you're seeing, this student is following this particular author on all of these points. Try and mix it up a bit so that you don't look as if you're relying too much on one author. Obviously, some of the authors are leaders in their field. So if you're dealing with someone like Albert Cohen, you will spend some time on Albert Cohen in terms of subculture theory, but don't over-rely on one or two authors overall or periodically. Over-reliance on non-academic sources. Again, this is a common comment on work that hasn't quite made it. Too much website citation, not enough articles and books based on research. So that's another one. Fizzles out at the end, as I said. That often happens actually. It's almost as if they run out of steam, and that's a great shame because they've done all of that great work. Sometimes it's about failure to explain some of the key concepts that because quite often the student understandably thinks that the marker's going to understand what this is about, but don't think like that. Show that you understand it, and so sometimes failure to deal with a particular concept or theory, you've moved on. And then finally overuse of quotations, as I said.
Okay. In a sentence, how would you summarise getting from good to excellent?
Right. I've got some keywords again. Just polish, structure, so important. Flow, clarity, command and authority. Show that you're on top of this field, and that impresses the marker. Heavily sourced, peppered. Degree of innovation, enterprise. It doesn't have to be an original piece of work by any means, but show enterprise, show initiative, go off-piste a little bit every now and then, as long as you stay with the question, and above all, make sure that you've made a strong conclusion.
Yeah.
So
leave a lasting impression. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. That's been very
Pleasure.
useful. I hope that's been useful for you as well. And we're looking forward to seeing some fabulously excellent essays being submitted soon.